On the first day, today we'll be discussing about the Active Directory pen testing and attack techniques, then binary exploitation and reverse engineering. Then the agenda for today is this. So first, we'll be starting off with the introduction of the Active Directory. So if you are someone who is not aware about Active Directory, what it is, what different things are there, what are the components of the Active Directory, so we'll be starting from the basics and introduction to the Active Directory security. Then we'll see how to perform the enumeration using the tools like Bloodhound and Sharphound in the Active Directory, how to gather the details about the target, and then exploiting the authentication protocol. We'll see some attacks, that how these attacks are performed and how these attacks affect the Active Directory environment. And then we'll be having a case study. And also, now let's move to our course. So let me describe Active Directory for you guys, those who are not aware about Active Directory, who haven't worked into Active Directory. Imagine your office building has hundreds of employees, computers, uh, printers, files. So you need a smart system to manage who can access what, who works where, and what device belongs to whom. That's what Active Directory does, but for a computer network. So it's a centralized system created by Microsoft which helps IT admins to manage users, computers, groups, permissions, resources, everything. Yes. So Active Directory helps you to manage multiple things, right? Now the database in which the Active Directory stores the information. The correct answer is the file name ntds.dit, right? This file is the main database used by Active Directory. It stores everything from user accounts and passwords to group memberships, domain configurations, everything. Now, when we are talking about Active Directory, so we have Active Directory components. Now, there are two types of components in the Active Directory: physical components and logical components. Now, when we are talking about these components, when you design your identity infrastructure, you need to consider both components. Logical components can change at any given time according to the business requirement, but you won't be able to easily modify the physical components compared to logical components. So the placement of these components will define the efficiency, security, reliability, and manageability of your identity infrastructure. So it's crucial that we get it right in the beginning before we move on to the advanced identity infrastructure planning, right? Now, when we are talking about these components, so the first we have is logical components. Now, what are logical components? Each business has its own hierarchical organization layout. It may contain multiple branch offices, multiple group of companies, and many different departments. So each of these components in the business, it carries out different operations. Operations in the sales department are completely different from the IT department, right? Everyone is bound to the company by following different operational guidelines and targets. When we design the identity infrastructure, we need to match it with the company and its hierarchical layout in order to manage resource and security effectively. So logical components help you to structure the identity infrastructure by considering the design, administration, extensibility, security, scalability. right? Now, the first component that we have is forest. Okay, let's understand it with the example. So you might have heard there is a forest with the name Amazon forest. Yes, everyone knows. There are different animal species living there, right? More than 400 tribes are living there, right? Each of these animal species is different from each other. Reptiles, mammals, snakes, fishes all have different characteristics, and we can group each of them by considering their characteristics, right? The tribes which are living in the forest, they also have their own language, own culture, own boundaries. But all these animals and tribes, they share one forest. They use food, water, and other resources from the Amazon forest to survive, right? So Amazon forest have well defined boundaries, right? Another forest in the 100 miles from Amazon forest is not called Amazon forest. Its name and boundaries are unique, right? So Active Directory forest can be understood in the same way. Active Directory forest, it represent a complete Active Directory instance. It is made of one or more domains and domain trees, right? Each domain has its own characteristics, boundaries, and resources allocated, but at the same time, it shares a common logical structure, right? Tribes, they have relationship with the forest and different tribes, and domains in the Active Directory forest will have a trust relationship, true two-way trust relationship. Different tribes in the Amazon forest, they are not named after Amazon. So each tribe have its own name. Domains in the forest can contain any domain name, whatever you want. Then we have domain. So forest is a collection of domain or domain trees. But what is a domain? Now, if we talk about the same example which we were taking, the Amazon rainforest, so we can say there are more than 400 tribes living there, right? Each of these tribes is unique in certain ways. Each tribe has a different language and culture. They have their own territory to do their hunting, farming, fishing. Each tribe know its boundaries and does not cross others' boundaries because it can lead to war between the tribes, right? Each tribe has its own tools and methods for hunting and farming. And each tribe has different groups assigned for different tasks. Some are good at hunting, some are good at farming, and some are good at cooking. All their contribution help them survive and grow as a tribe. So the Active Directory domain can be understood in the same way. The domain contains the logical components to achieve administrative goals, right? So domain become the security boundary for the objects inside it. Now, object has its own administrative goals. So individuals in the tribe, they have different identities and responsibilities, but all of them, they are the part of the tribe and the forest, right? All the objects in the domain, they are part of common database. Everyone in the tribe still needs to follow some of the common rules. Objects in the domain are also controlled by security rules which are defined. So these security rules are only applicable within that particular domain and are not valid for any object outside the domain boundaries, right? A domain also allows you to set smaller administrative boundaries within an organization, right? So when we were discussing about forest, we discussed that forest can contain multiple domains. So managing a forest is difficult because its administrative boundary is large. You are an administrator, you have to take care of 7 domains. Impossible. Yes. So domain allows you to set smaller administrative target. So Active Directory is divided into multiple partitions to improve efficiency, right? Domain is also a partition of Active Directory, right? Each of the domain controller has a copy of domain partition, and it is shared only by the domain controller within the same domain tree, right? So we have forest. Forest has multiple domains. Domains has objects like users, computers, everything. Yes. Then we have domain trees. So domain trees is a collection of domains, right? Let's say there is a person who is living in UK with his wife and daughter, and his parents are living somewhere else. Let's say Sri Lanka, right? Now the person moved to a new house, but that didn't mean that he is not the part of the family anymore. He is still the son of his parents. He still carries his father's surname, right? He also inherits tradition and characteristics from his parents, right? So domain tree is a collection of domains that reflect the organization's structure. The person whom we are talking about, his parents and he are bound by parent-child relationship, and it is different from other kinds of relationship. Domains inside the domain tree have a parent-child relationship. So the very first domain that you will be creating, that will be called the parent domain, right? Or you call it root domain as well. All other domains in the domain tree, they are called child domain. There will be only one parent domain in the domain tree, right? So if let's say abcadmin.com is the domain name which is used for the website, and organization needed to host another website to maintain support requests, right? So subdomain will be created, and subdomain will be, let's say, support.abcadmin.com. So Active Directory forest can contain non-contiguous domain names. The very first domain that you will be creating, that will be, it will become the forest domain, root domain. So forest is something which can contain multiple domains or domain trees, right? Then we have domain. So domain is basically an organizational boundary where your objects are stored, right? So if I'm saying abcadmin.com is the forest, right, or the domain, then I created a domain with the name, let's say, support.abcadmin.com. So support.abcadmin.com will have the users and devices and the permissions of only those users who are working in the support team. Yes. Then after that, domain trees will be abcadmin.com, xyzadmin.com, and below that multiple subdomains or multiple domains you have created. That will be called domain tree. Perfect. Then we have something called organizational units. Now, one domain, handling one domain, it is very difficult also. So within the organization, objects can be categorized into different groups considering their operations, organizational structure. So organizations, they have multiple departments. We can convert each of these departments into child domain and group each of the departments, right? But child domain will need a separate domain controller because it will have a separate domain partition. Isn't there a better way to group these objects? So that's where organizational units come into the picture, right? Organizational units help to group objects on a smaller scale within the domain. And the most common way is to group objects that have similar security requirements. Like there are more than 50 users in the sales department. So the sales department uses common shared folder and printers. So their security requirement for data and network are similar. So we can create an organizational unit called sales and group and put all the sales department users into it. So now if I have to manage it, right? So let's say I have, there is a new security policy that needs to be applied on the devices of sales users. So I don't have to provide the policy or implement the policy one by one to all the 50 users. I'll just implement the policy for the group sales and it will work. It will be implemented for all the devices inside this group. If any new user like arrives, if new person joins the organization, that person will be added to the group sales. All the security policies will be implemented automatically. Next, we have physical components. Now, when we talk about physical components, like physical components, if a system has like logical components, so they can be changed, right? Both are important. But physical components are more important because they cannot be changed anytime, whenever you want, right? So what we have domain controllers, the first thing. So domain controller is a computer that runs a Windows Server operating system, right? And it holds the Active Directory domain services role. So it can uh, either be physical server or it can be a virtual server, right? Now domain controller, it basically holds the directory partition that will be replicated to other domain controllers in the same domain, right? uh, yes, Asila, organizational unit group policy can override domain level group policy, but it depends on like especially the order of processing and whether any policies are enforced at that level, right? So when we are talking about the domain controller, the domain can have any number of domain controllers. Now the number of domain controllers is dependent on the enterprise's size, geographical placement, and network segmentation, right? So in Windows NT, it uses multiple domain controllers, but it maintains a single master schema. This means that directory changes can be made from a specific domain controller only. Correct. So now, why domain controller replication is needed? Let's say this is domain controller 1 in Africa branch. This is domain controller 2 and let's say US branch. This is domain controller 3 in India branch, right? All these domain controller will be telling what all changes have been made to the Active Directory, right? So if a user updated the password here in domain controller 1, so domain controller will advertise that change to all to other two domain controller. This is called outbound replication. right? When a domain controller advertises the change that have been made, that is called outbound and replication, and the domain controller which accepts those changes, that is called inbound replication, right? Just take an example that you are from, let's say, uh, Kerala, and you are in Delhi for some work, right? So what you did, you wanted cash, so you withdraw the cash from ATM. Now it will, that information will be given to all the domain controllers of all the branches of your bank. Why? Because if it is not updated, then you will be able to withdraw in any amount of money, because it is not getting updated in the centralized database. That's why this particular replication is needed. Correct, Supriyo. Then we have global catalog server. So global catalog server in Active Directory is like a supercharged address book for your entire Active Directory forest. Regular domain controllers knows everything about its own domain. Global catalog server holds partition information about every object in the domain, right? So let's say there is domain A and there is domain B, right? You are the part of domain A, right? And want to search it for a user in domain B. So regular domain controller in domain A won't know about the users in domain B, but a global catalog server will. So it helps with forest wide searches, user logs on, and exchange and other app that need to look up users across the domain, right? So that kind of communication is done through global catalog server. Then we have Active Directory sites. So Active Directory sites define a physical topology of the network. Now sites can be separate buildings in a campus network and branch office in a separate city or even in a separate country, right? So there is an organization, they have their office in London. Now they need to like, due to business requirements, the company opened a branch office in let's say Toronto, right? So Toronto will get its own domain controllers, right? But logically, the domain controller used in London and domain controller used in Canada, both of them are in the same Active Directory forest and domain. Both networks are interconnected with the leased line, right? So those are Active Directory sites. Next thing that we have is an attack. Now, when we talk about the attacking in the Active Directory, right? So attacking means that you are abusing the features of the Active Directory, right? There are some services, there are some protocols. You are abusing those features, right? So now what we have, there is a protocol in Active Directory which goes by the name LLMNR poisoning. Basically LLMNR. LLMNR stands for link local multicast name resolution. Now link local multicast name resolution, this is a protocol which is like DNS, but it works in the local environment. That means DNS works over the internet. It cannot route over the internet. It will just work here. in the local environment. So what happens? There is a device in the environment. Now it says that I want to connect to 𝐾EMA.local and it is mistyped, right? The spelling, there was a spelling error. Now DNS says I don't have that information. I don't know who is 𝐾EMA.local. I'm not aware about it. Yes. Now what happens? Now the device uses LLMNR protocol to multicast in the whole network. It sends a message that is there anyone that knows 𝐾EMA.local. Attacker was listening all the requests which were going on in the environment. Attacker says, yeah, sure, I know. Send me the hash of your password. The client will send the hash of the password. Attacker has the hash of the password. Now attacker will try to perform brute force or try to find out the plain text of it. Not directly, LMNR poisoning does not bypass the KRBT service. It can be a stepping stone towards the attack to eventually compromise it. Because the KRBT service, after getting the access of the system, then we move towards the KRBT. So this is just a stepping stone. You are trying to enter the system. So how you will enter? You found that there was a service going on in the network, and you can basically get the access. Credential dumping is this is called. So you dump the credentials. Now you will take the access of that user, then you will abuse the KRBT service. Now let me show you the Active Directory first. So this is our Windows server, and all the services you can see, DNS, certificate services, domain services, everything is running here. And my domain controller name is Hydra DC, and my domain name is marvel.local. And if you see users, so these are the users that we have, right? Admin, Frank Castle, Guest, Peter Parker, SQL Service, Tony Stark, all of them. Now, the very first thing we'll do, we'll attach our Windows 10 machine to this Active Directory. So first thing, we'll go to the network settings. And then adapter options. Open the properties. IPv4, and in the DNS server give the IP of your Active Directory Windows server. Click on OK, and then we'll go to access work or school. Here I'll click on connect. Now here there is an option, join this device to a active local Active Directory domain. Let's give the domain name marvel.local. The username and the password. Now this machine will be attached to the Active Directory, and it will be logging in as a user of Active Directory. For getting, we do LLMNR poisoning, Kant, for getting the credentials of the user and then getting inside the user's system, right? So nowadays what happens is whenever you are building an Active Directory infrastructure, so you basically disable this LLMNR protocol because there is no use of it. Perfect. Now for performing LLMNR poisoning, there is a tool which goes by the name Responder. Now Responder is a very widely used tool in pen testing scenarios, and red teamers, they use it for lateral movement across the network. And Responder gives many useful features like LLMNR poisoning or NBTNS poisoning, NetBIOS name service poisoning, right? And it includes several built-in servers also, like HTTP, SMB, LDAP, all of them, right? So what we'll be doing, we'll be using LLMNR. We'll be using Responder to perform LLMNR poisoning. So the syntax is responder hyphen I for the interface and Ethernet 0, the name of the interface, and responder will be running. Right? So you can see HTTP server, HTTPS server, and lots of other servers. And there are poisoners for DHCP, DNS, NBDNS, all the poisoners, right? Now, let's say there is a victim. What victim did, victim wanted to know that where is the folder wow, right? So victim will ask to the DNS server which is running in the Windows server. DNS server will say no, I don't know it. Then my Kali Linux, the responder running in the Kali Linux said that I know where is the folder wow. You just have to provide the hash of your password with, you have to share it with me for authentication. Windows 10 shared it and I have the credentials now. Yes. Now with these credentials, what I can do is I can try to crack the password, right? So I'll create a file hash.txt, paste the hash, and then we'll use the tool hashcat to crack the password. Let me first gzip -d. Okay, and now the attack using hashcat. So hashcat, it needs like physical system for performing the cracking of the hash, or basically resolving the hash. This is a cloud machine, that's why there is no GPU, and if there is no GPU, then it will not work perfectly. Right, so just let me check if I have the hash already present so I can show you how hashcat works. So I have a file where a hash is saved, llmnar.txt inside that, and when I start the attack, so it says all hashes found as pot file, empty entries, use hyphen hyphen show to display them. So hyphen hyphen show. So you can see that here is your plain text of the hash. So this is your LLMNR poisoning. Next we have, like, once you have the credentials with you, right? So if you have the credentials, then your next step is finding out more information and getting the output, right? So for enumeration, we use a tool which goes by the name Bloodhound, right? Bloodhound is installed in 3 steps. It has 3 phases, right? So it has 3 things: GUI, where you will see everything; scraper, which will scrap the data from the target; and the database, where the data will be stored. So scraper will scrape the data, store it in the database, and GUI will bring the data from the database and show it to you in a GUI format, right? So Bloodhound is programmed to generate graphs that reveal the hidden and relationship within an Active Directory network, right? And Bloodhound enables the attackers to identify complex attack path that would not be possible to identify. Now let's see how we can work with the bloodhound and how it helps us. So here, the very first thing, just a second. Now this is your bloodhound and sudo su. The database you have to start. So you will write neo4j console. If I go to the browser, this is the database, right? Now, once the database is up and running, uh, then start the bloodhound again. Neo4j. Okay, let's find the password first. Okay, I'll check the password of this, my new 4G. I misplaced it. But what happens is you will install the Bloodhound in your system and then you will scrape the data out of the system. So it will show you a graph like this. So if you see in this graph, what we have, you have analysis. So analysis has all the queries that you can execute, right? So the queries in the sense that find all domain admins, find shortest path to the domain admins, find principal with the DC sync rights. So this will give you the graph and will give you the path that how you can reach or take over the Active Directory server, right? So by looking at this graph, you can you can strategize that which basically what attack you will do, how you will move forward, what other things you will do, right? So if there are any DC sync rights, so it will show you DC sync written, like here you can see GP link, group policy link. So group policy abuse you can do. So that's how you will find out. Then there is an attack called Kerberoasting. How many of you guys know what is Kerberos? So Kerberos protocol, it defines how clients interact with a network authentication service. Clients, they obtain a ticket from the key distribution center, right? KDC we call it, and they submit these tickets to the application server when connections are established. Yes. So every domain controller uses or runs a KDC, which is called key distribution center, right? Which distributes the tickets to all the users, right? So AR, like Active Directory uses KRBT GT account in the domain, right? So the request will be sent, like first authentication will happen, then the service ticket will be given. So attacker sent a request that I want to connect to this application server. Windows domain controller will say first authenticate yourself, then it will give you ticket granting ticket. Then you will give that ticket granting ticket TGT to this Windows domain controller again. Then that ticket granting ticket will be accepted and then Windows domain controller will give you service ticket. Then you will have to give that service ticket to the application server for access, for accessing it, right? Now this ticket is stolen. So Kerberoasting is a technique that allows an attacker to steal the tickets that is encrypted with the RC4, right? Now what attacker does with that ticket, after stealing the ticket, attacker will brute force that application service hash and extract its password, right? So what you do, you have compromised host, right? Then you will find out, you will scan the registered service principal name, right? Then you, from that device, you request the ticket granting service ticket for the discovered, let's say your service is SQL service, right? So for the SQL service you will ask for the a ticket, right? Then you will dump that ticket, right? And that ticket will have the extension .kirby, KRBI, right? Then you will convert that Kirby format into a Crackle format, and then you will use dictionary for the brute force attack, right? So there are scripts also which you can execute, right? So directly executable, you don't have to do anything, right? So there are scripts that will find out the accounts for you. The name of the script is find potentially crackable accounts, right? So if My machine works. Let's see if it is able to download. Okay, we have to download here. Let me download from Kali. So this is your script, right? Now this script find potentially crackable accounts. It will give you the name of the service which is vulnerable, right? So let's try to execute it. Save file. Yeah. Service Apache 2 start. Okay, now let's copy that file slash home slash college slash download slash 2 slash where slash www slash html 10.128. Just a second. Okay, now let's create a file. Paste the code. Save as. Let's see if it is saved. Documents. Yep. Now here you will start PowerShell. Now the script that you have downloaded, right? So it takes too much of time to download the script, because see what will happen if you will download directly from the internet, from the GitHub, it will, your browser will give you a lot of error. And we know that the target victim on whose device we are downloading it, that is also like having security, so its browser security is not disabled and everything. So you have to find out a way by which you can deliver this file to the target machine, and then you can execute it, right? Then for execution also there are lots of problems, right? If you are able to execute or not. So if I write import hyphen module dot slash, see, now there is security implemented by the Windows server. How can you bypass this? Anyone who knows what security it is called and how we can bypass it? So I'll write PowerShell.exe hyphen execution policy bypass. Now let's see if it works. The script contains malicious content blocked by your antivirus software. Now, how will you execute it? So then you will find Windows Defender. Then you will disable that Windows Defender firewall. Then you will be able to execute this file. Yeah, now it's working. Now we have imported the module. Then we have dot slash and then hyphen full data hyphen verbose. The command. So now we have executed the command find potentially crackable accounts.ps1, but it is not able to find out any account which is crackable. But if there was any, right, it would have given you an output like, let me show you, like this, right? The SQL service is vulnerable and all. So this kind of output you will get. So these are the scripts which will help you in performing Kerberoasting. You don't have to do anything, right? Three scripts are there, right? First script will find out the name of the crackable account. Second script will find out its SPA name, service principal name. Third script will give you the ticket, the stolen ticket. That's it, right? So it's same like you are impersonating as me, and then you are getting access to the resources. That's Kerberoasting. Now, last attack that we have is pass the hash, right? Now, when we talk about pass the hash, so one of the things that I learned in exploitation was after gaining the session, one should hunt for credentials or hashes. That's the fundamental activity that attacker performs, right? So pass the hash is a part of lateral movement. Now, when we talk about lateral movement, it means moving from one system to another. So after gaining the hashes, it is up to the attacker what they decide to do with the hash. So they can try their hand at cracking it, but it is a difficult and time consuming process, right? So during authentication, the basic procedure is password is collected from the user, then it is encrypted, then the hash of the correct password is used for future authentication. So Windows, it keeps the hash in its memory so that the user doesn't have to enter the password again and again, right? In credential dumping, we see that we have extracted lots and lots of hashes. As an attacker, we don't know the password. So during the authentication, we provide the hash instead of password. Windows will compare the hashes, welcomes the attacker with open arms, right? This is what pass the hash attack is in a nutshell, right? So Microsoft did what? Microsoft replaced RC4 encryption with a newer one, AES, Advanced Encryption Standard, right? And credential guard was introduced. So this led many users to believe that pass the hash attacks are gone for good. But the reality was different. These changes made the attack difficult to perform, but they never really solved the problem at its core, right? These changes that were introduced, they made some techniques and tools useless, but some were still working. So this created a sense of confusion among the community, right? Now, in pass the hash, there are two steps. First is extraction of hashes, right? So this can be done from a machine that an attacker directly attacked or the machine that was in the same network as the compromised machine. Then second is using the hashes to gain access to the compromised machine or another machine, right? So what you will do, you got the access. Now you will send those hashes for as an authenticator for the authentication to different devices or different machines, right? So you found that my password hash is this 𝐴𝐴X127Y anything, right? So now you will give this hash to multiple IP addresses or multiple devices in my network, thinking that yes, it might give me something. Now if the Windows device whom we are sending the hash, if that Windows device is using the same password or same hash, so you will be connected to that device and then your attack is done, right? So that's how you do the pass the hash. Now pass the hash, the tool used for pass the hash, you can use Metasploit framework, right? Then there is a framework called Empire framework, right? You can use the Empire framework. Then there is a list like a tool library which is called IMPacket. Now IMPacket does what? IMPacket has a lots of scripts which will help you in sending the hash for authentication to the target. So if your service, let's say SMB is running, so over SMB also you can do the attack and perform the attack, right? So that's your pass the hash. Then there is a case study. Now in this case study, this was done on Active Directory, right? So an international organization was targeted in a sophisticated cyber espionage campaign, and as a detailed presentation in the RSA conference by incident response experts from RSA Security, they provided how the attack happened. So first, the initial access, the attacker sent malicious Microsoft Word document through emails. When opened, it exploited a vulnerability to execute code on the victim's machine, right? Although the company's internet proxy blocked 7 attempts out of 9 attempts, with just one successful phish, gave the attackers a foothold. Attackers use the tools like Outlook Web Access to send internal phishing emails. They leveraged SharePoint to distribute the malware internally. Right? They used the tools like AD-Find and Bloodhound, which were used to map the Active Directory environment. Then, weak domain configuration allowed the attackers to escalate privileges and compromise the entire Active Directory forest, not just a single domain. Then, for persistence and data exfiltration with domain admin rights, they maintain access and exfiltrated sensitive data over an extended period. Right? So, what weaknesses we found here from this case study? Misconfigured trust relationship between domains, lack of monitoring for internal phishing and SharePoint abuse, over reliance on perimeter defenses like email filters or proxies, and no segmentation between high privilege and low privilege accounts. Right? And what we learned from it, AD is not just infrastructure, it's a crown jewel. Once compromised, attacker can move laterally with ease. Internal phishing is just as dangerous as external threats. Monitoring tools like bloodhounds can be used by the attacker, so defenders should use bloodhound also proactively so that they can know from where the attack can happen.